So waves as high as 30 metres that hit across 14 different countries. More than 220,000 people killed. It is 20 years since the tsunami hit coastlines across the Indian Ocean in one of the world's worst natural disasters. Today, the world remembering those who lost their lives in a series of memorials as people remember the day of horror and of miraculous survivals. Well, let's listen first then to that siren that sounded in Indonesia's Banda Aceh. It lasted 3 minutes to mark the time of the earthquake that triggered what happened. The sound as that siren rang out. Well, research shows that over 16,000 people who died were from India. We're going to cross now to New Delhi, talk to our correspondent Sarah Jacob. Sarah, how are the events of 20 years then being marked there?
Well, while the epicenter of this 9.1 magnitude earthquake was just off the western tip of Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and a host of other countries, 9 countries actually to be exact, were affected by this horrific tsunami of 2004. And so it's emotional. It's an emotional day, and emotional memorials are being seen across these countries. Beachside memorials, religious ceremonies are being seen across Asia to commemorate all those thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives that were lost in this horrific natural disaster, one of the worst in recent recorded human history. And the reality is that these memorials and the mourning isn't just restricted to the shores of this region, given the fact because many of the victims happen to be foreign tourists who had ironically left their homes to come to these iconic, famed, sun-kissed beaches of South Asia to celebrate Christmas and the New Year with their family when this disaster struck. It has been a somber day of remembrance and memorial in homes across the world, really.
Sarah, have lessons been learned, though, from what happened 20 years ago?
Well, I think it's safe to say that that is the question on top of everyone's minds today. 20 years on, have any lessons been learned? The fact is that 20 years ago, when the tsunami took place, there were no warning systems. And there was little time for evacuation. And even though there was often over an hour's gap between when the tsunami's waves hit various continents and different countries, there was no warning system. And the evacuation time was very short. Today, we have millions of dollars. In the last 20 years, millions of dollars have been invested in the tsunami warning systems. We have an extensive, sophisticated global system of over 1,400 monitoring systems. And so things are very different. And so ocean experts say that, yes, we are much more prepared today, but they also worry that public memories are short and people have forgotten the scale of the destruction and the loss of lives 20 years ago. And we've seen infrastructure that was lost in Sri Lanka, in India, schools, hospitals, colleges, all of that, yes, it has been rebuilt, and it has been rebuilt keeping in mind how vulnerable they were. They're much more solid structures today, but it has been 20 years. And there's infrastructure maintenance, there's policy follow-ups, all of that, perhaps much is left wanting there. If I can just give you one small example, we do have in the years since the tsunami, we saw no-build buffer zone policies, for example, come up, which identify the coastline or swaths of the coastline as vulnerable areas where construction is prohibited in order to diminish future devastation. But a lot of these regions, these economies depend on tourism, and these policies, even though well-intentioned, have faced resistance. Some local communities, some affected communities whose livelihoods depend on the coastline. So it's difficult for the governments really also to implement this. So perhaps one could say that when it comes to a preparedness record, it's a mixed one.
Sarah, thanks very much. Sarah Jacob, talking to us from New Delhi.